This will probably be the last episode in this series, and today I want to talk about a phrase that my wife coined this week, right supremacy. No, I did not say white supremacy, I said right supremacy. And I'm not talking about the political right. I'm talking about trying to be right. Because what I see taking place in the world and in the church is a striving to be right instead of simply listening to each other and realizing how biased we can be as human beings. It's been the same back and forth over and over again. Charlie Kirk was a racist and a white supremacist. No, he wasn't. He had black friends who stood up for him and helped many black people, so he can't be a racist. He said that black women don't have brain processing power. No, he didn't. He was only talking about 4 specific black women. He said that pilots aren't competent. No, he didn't. He was just addressing DEI hiring. He said Martin Luther King was an awful man. Yes, he did, but he was only referring to King's personal transgressions. He said the Civil Rights Act was a mistake. No, what he meant was that the Civil Rights Act was being abused. Of course, I could go on, but I think you get the point. I want to make a very important statement before we move forward. Everything you are seeing right now is not about Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk is just a placeholder among many other placeholders for us to try to dig our heels in for our position. And that position is usually to try to prove the so-called other side wrong, with everyone trying to be right. No humility, no listening, just reactions on top of reactions, and people fighting for right supremacy. This is what it's been like lately. Another moment in our nation and even in our church when we find ourselves deeply divided politically and in some cases racially. And so the question we should really be asking is this: how do we settle this? Do we settle it by digging in and making more points for why the other side is wrong or hypocritical and why my side is not? Or can there really be unity in the church when we disagree so fundamentally on so many issues? I mean, think about it. Let these questions rattle around in your mind. What's more important, speaking out against racism or speaking out against the LGBT lifestyle? Is Black Lives Matter more dangerous or is Christian nationalism more dangerous? What's more important, defending our church's reputation or speaking out against vaccine mandates? Everyone watching this is going to have a different opinion on questions like this. And as I said in episode 1 of this series, unfortunately, generally speaking, much of this is usually connected to our political leanings, and because many of us have become cable news Adventists or cable news Christians, placing more value on the issue for the so-called side that we're on. We've been here before. We were here when George Floyd died. We were here again when vaccine mandates divided families, congregations, and it seems like even entire conferences were divided. And in more ways than one, we're still here. Make no mistake about it, this division is intentional, as the enemy knows that a house divided against itself cannot stand. I'm sure that the majority of us will never fully agree on any of these topics. Personally, as a self-proclaimed Republicrat or Demopublican, I see value in all of these issues. And there's 2 things that I usually say in all of my videos. Number 1, my distaste for the left and the right is quite equal. Number 2, when you have the prophetic eye, you will be able to place the proper value and perspective on all of these things so that you will be able to properly navigate all of this fighting without getting consumed by anger, bitterness, defensiveness, or resentment, or any of the other things that happens to us all too often. I shudder every time I see another video of fighting and firing shots back and forth from our people, because I know that others looking for the truth will see all of this taking place online, in the open, and they will see a people who are supposed to be the most unified, but who are just as divided as everyone else, and it sickens me every day. So where does this leave us? How do we fix this? As I already said, we are probably never going to be able to agree on all of these issues, because the majority of our people, as I said, have become cable news Christians. Some will continue to believe that Black Lives Matter is more dangerous than Christian nationalism, and some will continue to believe that Christian nationalism is more dangerous than Black Lives Matter. Some will continue to believe that racism is not a major issue, and others will continue to believe that racism is the biggest issue that we're facing. Of course, the list could go on, but again, you get the point. The reality is that many of us do not and may never fully understand each other because all of us have different experiences and as a result, completely different ways of viewing the world. We process truth, error, trauma, pain, and even disagreement very, very differently. And as a result, more often than not, Instead of showing respect, compassion, or sympathy for another person's experience or perspective, we often spend our energy in anger trying to get others to see things our way, demonizing those who see things differently. You know what I mean. Fighting for right supremacy. And make no mistake about it, it happens on both sides, whether that side is political, racial, or social. In the past 5 years, the truth is that in all of these situations, whether it's George Floyd, Charlie Kirk, or the vaccine mandates, generally speaking, these issues somehow get connected to politics. But the common issue isn't just politics. The common issue is how we perceive truth, error, fear, and pain. And it's also connected to pride that leads to a lack of empathy and a lack of forgiveness when we're dealing with the so-called other side and trying to make our point. Many people think that the most recent issue surrounding Charlie Kirk's death is the issue, but it really isn't. The reaction to this is merely a symptom of a deeper problem that's always festering beneath the surface. And it's this. It's about how we treat each other and view each other as friend or foe when we don't see things in the same way. In this most recent issue that has resulted in so much division, we see an example in the man of Charlie Kirk, who was a flawed human being, much like you and I. He was a mix of good and evil. He was a man that said things that were Christ-like at times, and he was also a man who said things that can be taken as racist or not racist, depending on an individual's experience. Everyone has already presented their lists of why he was or wasn't racist or a white supremacist. Everyone has already stated their case, but I believe that's not really the point. The real issue here is twofold, and it lies with us, not him. Number one, should we be dismissive of our brothers and sisters who were wounded by his words? Should we expose and demonize those who responded in anger by writing them off as race baiters? And number two, should we condemn our brothers and sisters who saw the positive side of his character and chose to mourn his death? Should we seek to demonize them and write them off as supporting racism? First, the answer to question number one. Some of the statements that troubled many people were Kirk's statements regarding the Civil Rights Act, how he was dismissive of Juneteenth, and his statements that Martin Luther King was an awful person, and other statements that I referenced in the beginning of this video, talking about the brain processing power of 4 prominent black women. For many, those statements are no big deal because they believe that his statements were taken out of context and that the other attributes of his character outweigh those things. However, for others who have experienced racism, both now and in the past, these statements hurt deeply. This is why I shared my stories in episode 0.5 of this series. Not because I was looking for pity, not because I was trying to race bait, but because I was trying to show that while these words were not everything, they were also not nothing. But boy, at the very least, for someone who has experienced racism, those words sure were something. So even if you didn't see them as racist, try to understand that there are people in our churches right now who were alive during the 50s and 60s, who saw and experienced racism firsthand. And there are still many that still experience it now. Really think about how those words may feel to them, even if you don't understand it. Now, I'm not defending anger, but I'm also asking you to understand that when people feel like they're not being heard, oftentimes they will get angry. Just ask the people in our church who did not feel supported regarding the vaccine mandates. And by the way, as I've said before, someone very close to me was one of those people who lost their jobs. So I get it. But the common thread is that when people don't feel heard, they speak up loudly and they speak up frequently. The issue at hand is how will we respond when someone is expressing their pain or frustration? Yes, sometimes angrily. The correct response is not to say suck it up or toughen up. The correct response is not to say get over it. The correct response is not to just say that's not what he meant by those words. The correct response is to also say, I can see how that might have hurt you, and I'm sorry that it did. This is what it means to fulfill the words in Scripture, to weep with those who weep. And if you find that difficult, then that's just fine. It's always difficult when we have to die to self. And now to answer the question of how those who disagree with Charlie Kirk should respond when someone wants to celebrate or mourn his life. It must be understood that God is a God of freedom, and it is so important not to try to force our opinions of what we believe is right on others. People should be allowed to feel how they want to feel. People should be allowed to mourn who they choose to mourn, and celebrate who they choose to celebrate. Ironically, if you didn't already know this, Charlie Kirk openly minimized, and some would say mocked, Juneteenth, a recent day of remembrance that many have come to value. And now, on October 14th, 2025, there will be a day of remembrance dedicated to Charlie Kirk. I already know that there will be fighting about this as everyone continues to fight for right supremacy. I know that there will be fighting about whether or not he's worthy of a day of remembrance, just like people fight about whether or not Christopher Columbus or Martin Luther King are worthy of a day of remembrance. And this is where Christ really puts us to the test, when he says, "So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them." If you were hurt by Charlie Kirk's words and what he said about Juneteenth or Martin Luther King or the rest of it, understand that at this moment, as you can see from articles like this, many view Charlie Kirk as this generation's MLK. And now, he will have a day. Whether you agree or not is not the issue. The issue is, how will you respond? If the response you desire is respect for a day you value and a man that you value, then according to the words of Christ, then you should respond with respect for the day and the person that someone else values. And even if you find that difficult, then that's just fine. It's always difficult when we have to die to self. At the end of the day, this is what's most important. In moments of political or racial tension, how do we view our brothers or sisters that may be in a different camp? Are we following society by adopting a they-them versus we-us mentality? Or are we choosing to show respect and empathy even when we don't agree or understand someone else's position? When these issues arise, unfortunately, we will have to accept that there may be issues that people just view differently. We will have to learn how to accept that and still have respect and still strive for unity. Unity does not have to come from agreeing on everything. It doesn't have to wait until everyone is all on the same page, because unfortunately, that day will not come until we're in the kingdom. But what we can do is strive to embrace the humility of Christ. We can strive to give respect and empathy regardless of whether we feel we are receiving it. We can strive to give the mission of the gospel preeminence over all other issues. And it's in these moments where we simply have to learn to embrace the words of Christ. Blessed are they that mourn. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure. Blessed are the peacemakers. I'm really striving to embrace these attributes of Christ, to be meek, merciful, and a peacemaker, instead of a division maker, which is all too prevalent these days. And by God's grace, I pray that we can all cease being cable news Adventists, fighting for right supremacy. And now, by God's grace, we will get back to our regularly scheduled mission programming. God bless.